Want to be more thorough while also working faster? It doesn't matter if you're on the red or blue team, an augmented reality overlay can enable you to be more thorough and faster at the same time. No glasses, no goggles, Polarity delivers this superpower as an overlay on top of your existing workflow and tools. The free Community Edition connects to the data you care about to overlay the context you need to make informed decisions. Apply for early access today at securityweekly.com/Polarity. PlexTrack is the platform that helps cybersecurity practitioners get the daily work done. Red teams can create reports in half the time and track risk to resolution with the blue team. Teams can centralize remediation efforts across all scans, assessments, and audits. Effectively communicate risk in real time through simple visualizations, scanner and ticketing integrations, and robust analytics. PlexTrack is perfect for collaboration across all teams. Visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrack to claim your free month. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Do you want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly? Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to your favorite podcast catcher or our YouTube channel. Sign up for our mailing list and join our Discord server. That's securityweekly.com/subscribe. Also, in case you missed Security Weekly Unlocked, you can now access all of the content on demand, whether you registered before the live event or not, by visiting securityweekly.com/unlocked and clicking the link to register. And now on for the security news. John is still with us. John, thanks for joining us for the news.
Yay!
Heck yeah!
Thanks for having me.
It's going to be the really kind of fun news segment. I got some little hidden gems in there. Hopefully, you guys have had time to review them.
Hidden gems.
Where do we want to start with the security news? Wait, let's start with WRT54G history.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, Larry, it was really funny. Larry put this link in the show notes, and I
gotta give him credit. This came from Ming Chao in Discord,
nice.
and he said this smells like Paul and Larry, and I'm like, what is this?
Oh, yeah.
So it says WRT54G history, the router that accidentally went open source. And I started reading, and it started going into the history of Linksys and how the WRT54G came about. And I'm like reading it going, are they going to mention the book? Are they going to mention the book? Maybe they'll mention the book. I won't be upset. I'm proud of myself. I'm like, if they don't mention the book, I'm not going to be upset. And then they mention the book.
Freaking huge.
With a screenshot of the book with Larry and I's names on it. I was like, that's cool. Like, I feel like now we are officially part of WRT54G.
And then a breakout sidebar commentary on the book of like, it became a cult classic when there's a 400-page book on it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I sent this to the folks at work this morning and said, today in the Larry Feels Old, on today's episode of Larry Feels Old, there's an article about the Linksys WRT54G where they use legendary and like radical and cult classic, and they reference the book that Paul and I wrote on it. Like, the imposter syndrome is high today.
Yeah, we can't put ourselves and claim that we're part of the history. I think there needs to be some kind of external validation, and that was a really cool kind of validation point that the work that Larry and I collectively put into the book, was appreciated in part of that history, which I found interesting too from the article. Is still very much alive today. Like, you can still buy a WRT54GL router, which is fully open sourced, and you can hack away and put different firmware on it. So,
and in the article, was there also a quote from George Takei?
No, there was not.
Okay,
we're not quite that legendary, Jeff.
Keep open. Very cool. Is your book still available for sale?
It is.
Is it?
It is. Yep. Well, if evidenced by the last royalty check that we got, the last royalty notification, it wasn't a check because we haven't met the income earning for them to cut us the $50 check.
Ever or just not recently?
Not recently.
Not recently, but
not in any time even remotely recently.
Yeah, but that said, if you'd like a copy, we're doing the purged, and
I was going to say Google search and you can find the PDF somewhere on the internet. Yeah.
And if you want a signed copy, limited availability, I think I probably have 6 copies at home.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to keep one for me.
I can digitally sign the PDF.
I feel
and
like
email it to you.
because Paul wrote it.
Oh God, I got to get one, Larry.
I need to find an audio version.
Oh,
there is no audio version.
Well, then Paul, you have to read it to me.
That'd be painstaking. And now type ./WL space -I. Crap. That was pretty special right there. That was like a T-Mobile.
Yep. It's a T-Mobile hotspot version.
And I believe on the side of that, the void your warranty sticker has been removed on one side.
I think it was on the bottom, but
it was on the bottom. There was a sticker on the side.
There was a sticker on the side that's weird. Like
maybe on that model, the void your warranty.
But it's not sealing anything.
Oh, okay.
But clearly the void your warranty is
not on there because we did. Oh, look, Larry still remembers how to take it apart.
Duh.
I was saying, did you take it apart in the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
We took several for the book. We took several apart.
The sad part is, Paul,
some didn't make it. It's very sad.
No, the sad part is that I kept all of mine. We had a stack of like 10 or 15 apiece, and then you're like, "Yeah, I'm cleaning shit out. Do you want this box from me?" Yeah, I have your box too.
Right.
So yeah, I have all of them that we actually used for the book. You know, the sad part is that, you know, based on this article, we should sign a bunch of them and auction them for charity.
We should. That'd be cool.
We really should.
Oh,
yes, we should.
That would be awesome.
That's a great idea.
All right, so there we go.
We go. Said and done.
Yep, we're gonna auction a bunch of them. Some of them in working condition, some of them not. And we were
because not, like I said, not all like
made it.
Sometimes when you see things like no animals were harmed in the filming of this movie, like there was definitely harm done to WRT54Gs in the writing of the book.
Yes.
Like not all of them made it through.
Yep.
And it's very sad.
And the irony is I still have 3 of these in production.
Oh, that's really fun.
So there was a comment on the Discord channel that said Linksys made one with a PCMCIA slot for a 3G hotspot. Did you ever run into that?
I think we did. We didn't test it for the book, but we definitely saw them.
Oh yeah,
or heard about them or read about them. I don't know that we ever tested one.
Yep. And then that put us down a whole interesting path, Paul. Specifically when we started looking at like all of the other things that were possible with some of these routers, and one of them was the BT Home Hub.
Yep.
The British Telecom Home Hub, and we're like, oh, we still want one. And somebody sent me one.
Yep.
And I still have it.
Still have that one too.
Still have it.
Hey, so if you were considering moving on to the next story, do you mind if I shamelessly promote something?
Oh, yes, please do.
You totally should shamelessly plug.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, okay. Well, I'm going to make my shameless plug here. It's really not a shameless plug. It is just my upcoming class. I have a new class I'm about to launch next week, January the 19th, first day. It is called Enterprise Attacker Emulation and C2 Implant Development. We are going to do all kinds of cool things. We are going to talk about developing a C2 channel in C#. We're going to talk about shellcode delivery mechanisms in Golang, in Python, in C# again. We're going to talk about some evasion techniques. We're going to talk about lots of great stuff related to initial access operations, for both purple teaming or assumed compromise exercises, as well as potential red teaming techniques. And we're going to focus from a programming perspective and teach you some skills that you can develop your own code to perform some of the evasion techniques needed to actually get yourself C2 channels up and running in environments as a penetration tester. So I hope you will take a look at it. I posted the registration link in Discord. It is in the events training channel, and the quick and dirty link is just bit.ly/JOFSC2 class with a capital J, a capital C, and capital C again. But go look at that training link, and we still have room for some more folks. And the other really, really cool thing about the class is that we are donating a portion of the proceeds to underrepresented people in the information security community as a result of the fees that are collected from the class. That portion of the proceeds will be tweeted out and announced after the class is completed. Not the actual numbers, but the charities that we are donating to. Just so you know, demographically, the most underrepresented people in the information security community today are women. We state it that way generically because that figure may change in the future, but we're really excited that we have a charitable portion of the program there. So there it is. Really excited. The class, just one more thing I forgot to say. The class is going to be 4 days. It's a very easy pace, 4 hours a day, so 16 hours total material. You will be given access to an Azure virtual machine, and you will be given access to all the materials as part of the class, and that you can download and retain, and also all of the source code that's made available will be available via deployment keys for 90 days following the start of the class. So there you go. I'm super excited to teach it. I'm pretty sure Tyler's coming to play in the class with me, which would be awesome. And I think Larry is interested as well.
Yeah,
but next one.
I was definitely interested, but by the time I realized, like, damn it, I really need to take this. It's next week, and I'm booked on customer work. Like, I really thought, like, I've been thinking about, like, can I do this during the week and like do work at night? But I'm writing a SANS course, and I'm like, that's my work at night, and so like. Having 3 jobs next week is not in my family's best interest, so I'm going to wait for the next one.
Yeah. Well, we'll get
going to do it again.
And just so you know, we're charging a nominal $495. It's a very attainable fee for most folks. I think that is going to work for most people. And we even have some folks from community colleges that are attending. Because some of their professors decided to sponsor them. In fact, Doug White was actually really good with some of his folks in Rhode Island, bringing some students into the class. So we're going to have a bunch of fun. It's going to be very casual. It's just going to be just a really good time. And I am a couple of things, actually. We're going to put on another class, certainly somewhere in the second quarter, to pick up a second run. And I am looking at the possibility, if there's enough demand, of doing an after-hours class U.S. Eastern Time to see if I can pick up some of my friends in Southeast Asia that's on a more accommodating time zone for them. So
that's awesome. Sweet.
Hey, I have a much quicker announcement, if I may.
Yeah. Go for it.
Since we're taking next week off and people aren't going to be able to watch any of our shows, they can tune into the next episode of Darknet Diaries. It's going to feature not one but 2 former NSA cryptographers.
Oh, so
I haven't seen a new episode of Darknet Diaries in my podcast feeds in a while, and I'm not sure. Like, I use Spotify and mostly I listen in the car, and it Android Auto does like weird things. I don't know if he hasn't released an episode in a while. One of my favorite podcasts though is Darknet Diaries, and Jeff, the fact that you're going to be on it, I'm so excited.
Yeah, he drops them every 2 weeks or so, he claims. So the next one is supposed to drop next Tuesday, the 19th.
Sweet. That's awesome. I will definitely move that to the tops of my podcast listening.
Are you curious? Take gets who the second ex-NSA cryptographer is going to be on the episode?
You.
NSA cryptographer specifically. Was it someone else in the pit, or was it a cryptographer?
Nope. It's
Matt Damon.
Someone.
Brian Snow.
No.
I only know so many NSA cryptographers off the top of my head. Like Jeff Mann, Brian Snow, and then it starts to taper off after that.
All right, give up.
I give up.
Yep.
Or do you want to be surprised?
No, I want you to tell us.
Marcus Carey.
Oh,
Nice.
Really?
Yep.
Nice.
So it's like an NSA focused episode. Marcus and then me.
That's
Very
great.
good.
Yep.
Looking forward to it.
And I am very honored to share the time with Marcus.
Fantastic. Lee,
real quick, John, I sent you a link to the news stories in that other Slack as a DM, so you might want to check that out. So you know what the context is now. So
both Larry and Lee had the Mimecast story, and I wanted to dig into it for a little bit. There seems to be a trend that is coming into the public eye, which means there's probably been a trend for a while, in that attackers are, well, first, Mimecast has suffered a breach. I thought the more interesting part was that the attackers were after the certificate used to authenticate the company's products to Microsoft 365. And that seems to be a juicy target. Someone that's closer to this than I am, I think I'm going to call on Tyler. Like, knock, knock. Can Tyler come out and play on this one? Because I want to see you talked about this before, Tyler.
Yeah, this is a common issue that we're running into with Azure and O365 and the permissions that applications are granted. So you have a couple different types of permissions that are in play here. You have application permissions, but you also have authentication permissions, right? You have users that allow applications to do certain things,
and that's
or authenticate in a certain way.
That's OAuth that lets you do that, right? When you give an application permission to do things to your account on your behalf, it should, I stress should, list what permissions it's requesting, and you grant that, and then it has those permissions.
Exactly. And when you're talking about Azure, one of the things that people don't realize is you're talking about Active Directory in the cloud, right? You still have the concept of users, you still have the concept of groups, you still have the concept of permissions. You're just losing some of the authentication protocols and the typical nature of Active Directory. But the way in which you're granting access to things like appliances or federation or things to leverage the hybrid nature of how communication is happening over O365, then you're starting to talk about things like certificates and something this.
Hold on, Tyler. Sorry, question. So when you say federated identity, that's like we've got a bunch of users in Azure AD or Microsoft Active Directory, and we recognize this group of users in maybe Google G Suite, and those users in G Suite should have this level of permissions when they authenticate to us, and that's federated identity in a nutshell, sort of, kind of?
Kind of. So federated, typically, when you're talking about O365, you're talking about a hybrid solution where you have an Active Directory on-prem that leverages an account with inside of Active Directory, the AD Connect account, that then syncs your Active Directory from on-prem into the cloud and or vice versa for certain things. And that federation then allows authentication to stream and different services to be leveraged between the two.
Right.
And so Mimecast, where they're leveraging O365 and O365 Exchange, now you're outsourcing essentially your Exchange function and the mail function of what you're doing. And in order for Mimecast to work, you've got to put something in between or integrate into your Exchange. And so in order to do that, you've also got to authorize it to be able to have certain levels of permissions to read all the mail, to receive it all, to do certain functions at the Exchange level that are highly, highly permissioned. Now that becomes very interesting when you start talking about a breach in this certificate that is stolen, because you can do a lot of things to all of the mail,
and so
from that access.
I don't want to pick on. I don't like to pick on vendors in general, especially like to pick on ones that are sponsors. And I'm not picking. I'm not picking on Mimecast. I mean, I'm just being fully transparent, right?
But then again, we call it like we see it.
We call it like
Vendor
we see it. Yeah, and of course, SolarWinds has had issues. Lots of vendors have had issues. Lots of enterprises have had issues. Like everyone suffers a breach. Okay, but the reason that Mimecast is a nice juicy target is there one or a very small number of certificates that if you were to compromise, you could then gain permissions to all of Mimecast customers. Is that the way I understand it?
Essentially, because Mimecast, well, depending on how they're deploying it, Mimecast is leveraging typically a deployed appliance or a virtual appliance of some kind, or leveraging a certificate for essentially a man in the middle for the mail, right? You have to have that relay for Exchange.
And this is not unique. I mean, in Mimecast defense, not unique to Mimecast, right? Any other,
not unique to Mimecast,
right? You're trusting providers that you are leveraging these services. OAuth is in similar things are used for things like I want this service to access my Google Drive, et cetera, all kinds of these enterprise services. Greathorn, for example, right? What actually Ryan was just talking about with Gmail. If they're leveraging the API, you have to trust another platform to be able to access the email so that they can help you. They can help protect it, right? So these are trust relationships that we're building across all kinds of different companies and services, not specific.
Jeff has a question.
Yeah, proof point.
Well, it's quick clarification
Wow.
question from the Discord. When you say certificate, are you meaning an authentication token?
In this case, for this access, yes, I believe that is what this would be referred to.
Or you
Now, not having looked at the appliance, like I understand how the appliance works and the transport, but I think it's a SAML. I think it's a SAML token is the proper, like, what it would be called.
Right. The certificate to create the other SAML tickets. Yeah.
Yep. And because that transport has to be trusted in order to do certain actions on Exchange and integrate with O365, right? Whether you're federated or not, that becomes a very juicy target. And I will be curious to see if this comes out of play from, other breaches or from information discovered from other recent breaches.
Yeah, Tyler, I mean, it's 2021. We can just say all roads lead back to SolarWinds. It's fine.
I mean, we've seen a lot of tech companies compromised, and I, like we said, this is probably the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
But what were they after? And was this just a proof of concept to kind of see if they can leverage the certificate, or are they leveraging the certificate against other organizations that are very interesting or more objective targets for them?
And this is what we talked about when we were covering the SolarWinds breach and incident for the first time. There was information in some of those articles that talked about some of the certificates and trust they were after, very much the same thing. If you could compromise, Microsoft certificates that they were using to allow users and enterprises to have trust in Microsoft services to other services and things like that. And I find this really scary and fascinating that when we look at a certain level of threat actor, the fact that they're having the forethought to go, like, they're thinking big, essentially. Like, hey, we can compromise SolarWinds, and that one breach is going to give us access to those organizations. But that wasn't even as big as they were thinking. Once we're in those organizations, what is the number one crown jewel that we can go after? Oh, let's compromise the certificates that allow us to exploit the trust that their customers have with their services. That, to me, that's how we would think with our evil hats on, right? And that's obviously how the actual threat actors that are not the good people are thinking today.
That's the kind of stuff we bring up in threat models, and people tell us we're nuts.
I agree.
A few years later, it happens.
Yes, so true.
Yeah, I think one of the key things to keep in mind, though, for something like this is the type of certificate that, if I remember right, for how Mimecast actually handles that transportation layer, this would allow someone to impersonate, right? Like,
yes.
it would provide a valid connection. But that also means that you would have to be either man in the middle, or you would have to find some way to leverage that with a secondary application that is leveraging that certificate to make it a valid connection to something. And so I don't think this is the end of the road or end of the goal. I think this is kind of, again, the tip of the iceberg. There's got to be something else in play, and I believe there's going to be another piece of software or some other attack. Maybe this is to decrypt stuff in a country that has the ability to do man in the middle very easily, or an organization that's already infiltrated and can have that kind of connection and decryption happen. So I don't think this is – I think someone stumbled upon this, and this is probably not the end of the road or end of the game for what we're going to find for this.
It's really interesting. Yeah. Where are we going next?
Hey, if you don't mind, I'd like to do one that's a little bit off the wall.
Sure.
It's not my story number 5, but it's the story number 1. And the article is the title is very innocuous. And think about having to deal with legacy equipment in your environment. Imagine, if you will, that a satellite launched in 1964 is still orbiting the Earth, and while the batteries have completely graded themselves and are no longer working, the satellite itself is still working,
still in orbit,
and is still in orbit, and is still working and powers up. when the solar panels receive enough energy to power the circuit, and then it starts transmitting.
Interesting.
It's still out there.
Man, that sounds like a movie plot.
Yeah, so Transit 5B5, launched in 1964, is the oldest working satellite broadcasting an intermittent signal on the 137 megahertz band. The problem is that no one knows how to decode the protocol anymore.
Except the robots that are receiving that signal and will kill us all.
Yep, kill all humans.
But it'll only be active for, a few hours a day when it gets enough power from the solar panels?
Exactly.
You know, that sounds like a challenge, to the hacker community. They should just round up a few folks.
Like, that's kind of the point. Like, they're working on decoding the signal and what it does and what the control resources are. And so you read through the article, and there's all sorts of interesting stuff there, and they've done some decodes, and they've got some GNU radio blocks on receiving it and doing the demodulation. And the conclusion is there is none. There's still an awful lot to figure out about Transit, the equipment on board, and its downlink, which will only come with time, data, and analysis. Like,
Which article is this?
this is my story number 1, Jeff.
Number 1.
Yep.
Thank you.
Could we replace one of the packet decoding operations in 503 with decoding this?
Maybe.
No, it feels like something that would be a hell of a CTF kind of thing. It would be really quite challenging.
See, they could fit well in the network forensics class.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
But Jeff, it sounds like a puzzle, right?
Yep. The other one that this sounds like an amazing thing for a CTF is that at DEF CON last year they did the hack space, and I forget who that was.
Oh yeah,
Space Force or some variety that they did the satellite hacking challenge thing, and this sounds like an amazing thing to be able to do.
And let this be a lesson to all you developers out there: document your damn code.
Yeah. Well, the problem, Jeff, the problem is that it is likely documented, but it's behind so much obscurity and/or classified that no one can get access to it, or it's been unclassified and no one knows where to find it.
It's in Warehouse 13.
Yeah, exactly. It's right next
to. It's in that warehouse where the Ark,
the Ark of the Covenant is. Yep.
And I believe that's supposed to be the same warehouse, by the way.
Yep. So
that could be dead wrong.
And this is thinking about the technology involved and the signals and all this type of stuff. For me, this is a really neat thing, software-defined radio-wise, in that this satellite 1964 is still out there and working, and it's kind of an unknown signal. We can go and decode it, but it's from space. And is very related to that the challenge that the CTF that they did at DEF CON this year. That I was part of a team. I didn't get any points for the team because life happened. But one of the things that I was going to try to do was to do some communication with the International Space Station. Like, we're sending packets to the International Space Station and back down and trying to receive it, and there were no passes of the ISS near me at the time during competition, so I was kind of dead in the water. But related, I learned a whole bunch within the last week across a bunch of different platforms, in that NOAA weather satellites fly overhead, and they have predictable paths. And I built a system based on someone else's instructions that now sits under my front deck with a nice antenna, helical antenna in my front yard, which needs to move because it's in the middle of the grass with a wire to it, that goes and captures all of the weather satellite data for all of the NOAA satellites that go overhead. But not only does it capture the satellite data, it decodes it and renders it to images and hosts it at AWS in a static AWS website, which I had to learn a whole bunch about Amazon S3 buckets and CloudFront and a whole bunch of other stuff to actually host. Like,
oh my God, I just figured it out. It's a counter and it's counting down.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah.
So I was playing with a similar thing a while back and I stopped, but I was building a dipole. For 1,000 megahertz. So I was curious, and it works really well. By the way, I was tracking planes.
Yeah, 1,090 megahertz. Yep, ADSB.
Yeah. and which was really funny. I was using software, and my wife walked in and she goes, "Is that planes on the map?" She goes, "Is that legal?" I'm like, "Well, they're transmitting." I mean,
Yeah.
right.
Hello.
It's kind of cool. So, what frequency range were you talking about there with the weather satellites?
It's typically around 137 megahertz. Okay. And you can receive that WeatherFax NOAA satellite data with a dipole antenna, holes placed on the ground at a specific degree angle, and I was doing that.
Do you need a ham radio license to be able to receive
nope,
that?
you don't receive
because you're not transmitting.
Because you're not transmitting.
Yeah,
Receiving you can receive.
Yep. And literally, I was using the inexpensive software-defined radio, the RTL SDR that we use in the SANS X617 class to do that.
That was going to be my next question because
Yes.
that's what I use for the plane data too. The RTL. Yeah.
You just need to set the antennas at a specific length and put it close to the ground, parallel to the ground, and be out there at the right time. But this does all of that automatically. And the dipole antenna, in a V shape, is not the best because the RF signal has a specific sort of pattern. And what you really want is a specific helical type of antenna, and I don't remember whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise helical antenna.
Something about reflection, refraction, scatter,
all
of the above,
all
right?
of those things. And the polarity of the antenna and the polarity changes. And I tried to buy one of these antennas, the really good helical antennas, and I couldn't find anywhere to buy one of these antennas.
It's frustrating when you've got like a really specific piece of hardware and you can't find it. Like, I hate that.
And everywhere said, "Oh yeah, you can build it. It just takes like a couple dollars of supplies."
Yes,
and literally, it's a couple dollars of supplies and about 8 hours worth of work. And I'm like, I don't have 8 hours.
And a soldering iron. And
I got
we got all that, yes.
But I have about 300 other projects already.
It's a matter of priority.
Yeah.
I agree.
And that's like the linear antenna I built for the 1,000 megahertz stuff. I mean, making one of those is short sections of coax and just reversing the polarity all the way up, but it takes forever to solder that crap.
Oh, you solder it. Like, I'll send you some tips. You don't need to solder anything.
Yeah,
I built one in 20 minutes sitting in front of the TV after I cut stuff. Like just click. One of my former students in 617, I'm on a Discord, and he mentioned he was doing something similar, and he found an antenna, and I'm like, where did you get that antenna? And he said, I got it from here. And I can share links with people who ask and those types of things. The problem is that the antenna was $350.
Ow.
But you know what? My bill rate. That like it was worth $350 and I bought one. And it was worth it. It was worth it.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here thinking, I've got this, ham radio porn mag here.
Oh my God, so that magazine is in my bathroom right now.
And then I got the handheld in my hand. This will do 137 megahertz.
Yes,
what the hell?
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. So will your RTL SDR from
yes,
yes,
I just got to find it.
Yep. So we go on the geeky radio bit.
Yeah, you guys are you're popular with the ladies, huh?
We totally. I got laid so much in high school.
Let me show you my radio.
It's all in the antenna.
Yep. So you cross the geek with technology, IT technology. I recently dove into some digital radio formats, specifically. And I'm trying to remember the technology, but it uses the awful name Brandmeister repeater network. And effectively what's happening here is you can transmit RF to a repeater and it backhauls over the internet. Mm-hmm. And you have specific talk groups like the old Nextel type of phones and that type of stuff.
Is that like I have the app that lets me listen to people who are listening to police scanners and stuff like that and relaying it like
kind of like that. Yeah, that would be the repeater.
Yeah.
But the repeaters are there, but the backhaul is all done over IP. Mm-hmm. And to the point that for me at home with this network, with this digital mode, I cannot reach the repeater nearest to me. But you can build your own repeater on a Raspberry Pi and a Shield, and it backhauls over Ethernet.
It's what it comes down to. A lot of I just need a Raspberry Pi and some supplies and.
Yep. So I built one. I actually built two, and the RF Hackers Sanctuary, the guys that do the RF the Wi-Fi CTF at DEF CON and the Wi-Fi Village folks, they have their own talk group and they do a weekly net check-in. And I actually checked into the net last night with Zero Chaos and folks.
Nice.
And using the hotspot that I built plugged into my Ethernet network, that the radio communication was local to my house. And I built one to go in my truck, and it connects to my cell phone, so it connects backhaul
So this is like
over
a
Wi-Fi over 5G.
CB radio that backhauls over IP.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. But you do need a license for it. So
You are definitely popular with the ladies.
dude, you have no idea. I gotta beat him off with a stick.
Oh, where do we follow that up? Oh, well, let's follow that up with the legal marketplaces. I mean, why not? So DarkNet was taken, DarkMarket rather, was taken offline. This is not the same DarkMarket. There was like 2009 DarkMarket, and then there was like today DarkMarket, because I guess people that deal in these dark market things aren't very creative about how they name things.
They're not very creative about how they name their dark market?
Yes, and they just keep naming it dark. I don't know. I guess maybe that's a strategy. Like, they already took off Dark Market, so if we name ours Dark Market, like, people think that's just one that's already been taken offline and they won't take us offline. But they occupied these underground facilities that were NATO-owned in Germany and...
Formerly NATO-owned,
and they were in Germany and Denmark, I think. And
Australia, Denmark,
is that the old one or the new one? The new one is Moldova and Ukraine.
This is the new one.
I might have been to the one in Germany, but I'm not saying that out loud.
Yep. No, I remember hearing that they had the
20 servers hosting a site in Moldova and Ukraine, and arrested an Australian man who was believed to be the operator. They were the largest underground marketplace. And hold on, I had some different quotes from the article that I thought were really interesting. Where is it? Where's my... Because Lee, you had this...
Aussie they arrested it.
Yeah.
Lee, you had the story as well. So they raided in September 2019 a small town close to the Luxembourg border.
Yep, I remember that one.
8 defendants, Germans and 1 Bulgarian. They were aiding and abetting 249,000 transactions involving drugs, money laundering, stolen information, and pornographic images of children. So child porn was being trafficked on here as well.
Everything else I'm cool with, except for the child porn.
Right.
This is what Sealand and Havenco was for.
Yes, the country they created off... Was it off the coast of England?
It was off the coast of England.
Yeah.
So it wasn't... Didn't I catch that there are like 500,000 users and 2,400 sellers in this marketplace? I mean, this is crazy big.
Bunkers in Holland and then Germany. Helping controversial sites. The cyber bunker had house servers for Pirate Bay, WikiLeaks, and a range of darknet markets such as Bulletproof Hosting, which we've covered in the past.
Parlor?
And that's probably... I was going to say,
clearly
if
not.
Parlor were to find a home, sorry, you're too late. They've already taken it down.
Yeah, so what was that? The founder of Pirate Bay was like, we stood stuff up and we stayed up for years and we're still up in Parlor.
Yeah. Is Pirate Bay still up and running?
Yeah.
Where are they hosted now? Some country somewhere. Yeah.
You
try
they
hard
were up
enough.
and running.
Yeah,
they were. Yeah, maybe after this bust, maybe they weren't.
They've been taken down. I don't know how many times they've been taken down. I don't know how many times, and they're back up within hours.
Yeah, Lee, to your point, the 2009 in 2019, Europol closed another darknet kind of market, Wall Street market, had 11.5 million customer accounts and 5,400 registered sellers.
Whew.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Because the point is, I think once you get to a certain size, you garner a certain level of attention, and then you get taken down. And I think if we, as good people, were to think about how we do this, it would be much smaller enclaves that didn't get as large as some of these bigger ones that get taken down. Because once you get to that size, I mean, you're going to garner attention.
You're saying multiple private redundant facilities that then scale and route through multiple public redundant scalable services?
Yeah, but not like Tor. More like maybe some IPv6 dark space somewhere that's hosting smaller enclaves that are connected together, you know? It's
similar
interesting.
to Tor, right?
It is. No, you're right.
But
yeah.
Tor is still traceable. Like people don't realize, like in order, even Bitcoin wallets, and how Bitcoin now functions. Like you have to be able to translate cash into Bitcoin, and those are all you got to give a debit card, a social security number in order to do that.
If you can remember your password. Is that story real? I thought that story was fake news. To be quite honest,
both of them are real.
There's two.
There's two stories. There's one British guy that tossed a hard drive, as he said, as they say in the UK, tossed a hard drive in the tip that's actually worth $210 million.
What does he mean? Tossed it in the tip?
He threw it in the trash.
Oh, okay.
Threw it in the trash. It's in the landfill, and he's been trying to get the government to let him excavate the landfill to find the hard drive, unsuccessfully. Yep. There's the.
I mean, it's funny to us. It's certainly not funny to that gentleman.
And then there's the new guy, which is ironic.
I think he works in I think the Bay Area or something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
And he has his wallet on an iron key.
Yeah. Is that what it is? I was wondering what the.
Yep.
It did sound like an iron key kind of device because you only get so many passwords. Guesses before it wipes itself.
Yep. Before it wipes itself, and he's got 2 guesses left. And for the record, for this guy, if he's listening, he's probably not. I recently stumbled across one of my old iron keys.
I did too the other day.
I couldn't remember the password, so I immediately took it to the workshop and smashed it with a hammer to see what was inside.
Yeah.
And it's like a brick, and the brick is encased in epoxy.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck. Good luck.
Oh, so there's physical.
Oh yeah. That was the deal.
Oops.
That was the deal. It's
not like something you can take to Iron Key and say, "Can you recover this for me?" Like no deal. That's like Apple. It's like going to Apple. They just laugh at you.
Yeah, pretty much.
You got to take it to some Israeli company, and they can crack it for you.
Yeah, well, and even the hardware, you got to get the top. You got to get the metal casing off, which wasn't too bad. You smashed it with a hammer on the anvil, but then inside was a bunch of. It was literally a 1/4 inch thick epoxy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then you got to get that away, and good luck.
You get your heat gun out, but your heat gun could melt some of the circuitry.
Yep. And epoxy and heat gun don't work all that well together.
Interesting. Sounds like you're speaking from experience. I love how you're like, epoxy and a heat gun don't don't melt.
Nope. Yep. I mean, it's possible. It is admittedly
the right distance with the right temperature. Even still,
admittedly, this guy that has the iron key, if what is on there is worth what he says it is, it would be in his best interest to pay experts to take care of this.
Agreed.
Because it would, if you want someone to do a good job,
split it with you 50-50.
Yep. Oh, 50-50. Like you could probably get into this, if he could go into it, kind of secretive about what was on it, you get this so I can get the data off. There's $500,000 $1 million in it for you.
Right.
Yeah, that's a very reasonable price to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. Those iron keys are great. Lee, speaking from experience there, I think too, because they probably
absolutely
you probably required them in some of your work.
Yes.
If somebody's smart enough to get into that, they're going to get into it, figure out what's there, and realize $500,000 is chump change.
Yep.
And
right.
But then again, they need to know the password to the Bitcoin wallet.
True.
That's there.
There's some safeguards there.
So
right?
So he's figuring out the password to the encryption for the USB thumb drive that it's stored on, and then they need the password to the Bitcoin wallet.
Password 1.
Could be.
Exclamation point.
Now you got one more guess. If that one's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So what about John picking the next story?
Oh, John's getting put on the spot now. There's a lot of stories there.
He can't go wrong.
Scroll and point. Yeah, it's like throwing the digital dart.
Pick one of mine. Pick one.
Although I keep going back to Paul's 13. So
it is, Jeff, you're I believe of all the hosts right now closest to this area. So maybe we'll turn to you.
So let's do that story while John picks the next one. How's that?
Yeah. I just, well, a lot of reasons why I added the story. One is, I think in our security awareness programs, we tend to have some incentives for people to do the right thing or reward people who spotted the phishing attacks.
Or I'll give you a candy bar for your password.
Yeah, or that.
Yep.
And so this story is get a free bag of marijuana with your COVID-19 vaccine.
Meanwhile, Paul's been vaccinated 318 times.
all in. But this is in the Washington, D.C. area, which is interesting. There was a Viceland show that was, I forget even the name of the show, but they were talking about the legalization of marijuana and how it plays out. It was a pharmacopoeia or some similar kind of show that was like, in DC, the laws are very specific and actually kind of weird. Like, you can't smoke it in public, but you can't sell marijuana, but you can give marijuana to anyone else up to a certain amount. I think in DC it's an ounce or 2 ounces or something like that. And so that's one of the reasons why this is technically legal in Washington, D.C. What's interesting is a lot of things. One, they're literally calling it joints for jabs. Except they're not distributing joints, because apparently they did that at the 2016 inauguration and realized that two things they did were really bad.
Well, no, two things that then was fine, but now is not.
Yes. Well, one was fine.
Wait. I think we have a new question 4. In the classic game of joints for jabs.
Right? Yeah, what's legal and what's not, right? Like testing your marijuana law knowledge. But they gave out joints in the 2016 presidential inauguration. They wanted to do that this year.
I was
they were
going
like,
to say,
wait,
do you prefer to stick it or suck it? But, well, go ahead.
So they're like, this is bad. And that was inappropriate, by the way. But they're like, this is bad because number one.
He's learning.
Or I'm learning. In 2016, we licked all the joints, and now in 2020 and 2021,
well, that was inappropriate too.
Can't do that, and that was also inappropriate. But number two, if we handed out fully rolled joints, people just started smoking them immediately. Which, under Washington D.C. law, you can't be smoking it in public. You can give it to each other, but you gotta be in the privacy of your own home to smoke it. So like this year, we're just gonna give you little baggies of marijuana if you go and get your vaccine. And again, the analogy into security is like, oh, spot a phishing attack. Do we give you a bag of marijuana?
Yeah, give you a bag of marijuana for your password.
Or the other way, right? Yeah. I just thought that was
so what I'm hearing you say, Paul, is that when it comes time for me to get my vaccine, you really want me to go get it in DC and pick you up something.
Yeah. Then you have to get it to me, which crosses state lines, which is a whole other set of laws that we'd have to potentially
just mail it.
Just mail it. It's fine.
You've been meaning to come visit me.
I would have to come visit you. Yes, then it would be legal as long as I didn't smoke it in public. I think
transport it back home across state lines.
Right. I think those are the laws. Don't again. Not a lawyer.
Yeah, but Jeff's got a man cave. He's kind of virtually in it right now, so you'd be good.
Well, also in the article, it goes into a lot of details about there's a bill in front of Congress to legalize marijuana at the federal level. Is it the MORE Act? There's a name for it. They also show activists in D.C. fairly recently. They're holding up like this giant inflatable joint. It's a very interesting read and wildly entertaining.
Heavily lobbied by the snack food industry.
Right?
And the cereal industry. Specifically Captain Crunch.
John, to your point,
and
there was
White Castle. Come on.
There was a snack. I forget the name of it. It was some play on a marijuana related kind of euphemism. Right in our town, the town where I live. In Rhode Island, and they were open from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. And before COVID, you could call them up and they would deliver you snacks. And they had Funyuns and popcorn and chips and all kinds of stuff like that. It was totally catered to the pot smokers. It didn't last very long, but it was entertaining.
Yeah, yeah, and that's also when you could hire an Uber or a Lyft to go buy you alcohol. You could also get them to buy munchies,
right,
for you.
Yeah, this was before Uber and Lyft too.
John, save us. Pick an article.
Yeah, because clearly,
let's talk more about the solar leaks.
Solar leaks.
Oh yeah,
number 6 under Lee.
Lee's number 6.
Lee's number 6 for the win.
Yes.
That sounds like a nice truck there, Tyler.
Lee's number 5. Sorry, Lee's number 5. SolarLeaks site claims to sell data stolen in the SolarWinds attacks.
Right. They were claiming they were selling stuff in the SolarWinds attacks. The domain was registered. I forgot what the group was called, but the acronym is tied to like Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear. When it was first came to light, they'd been registered for an entire 24 hours. So therefore,
I was
completely
partial to
legitimate site.
Huggy Bear.
That's something completely different.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Boy, that is a reference from a ways back there, sir.
Lee's, you're probably the only one that gets it. That's okay.
I don't.
That's okay. I'm appreciating it, and and Cisco's saying now they didn't have any of our stuff, but I saw somewhere else they were selling some stuff out there for $500,000-$600,000 for the data they had out there, which is pretty gutsy if it's not actual real data. And of course it got taken down.
Yeah, and it comes down to like who you trust. So Cisco, as an example, or any company come out and say, well, we weren't part of the the SolarWinds sunburst attack or whatever you want to call it. And then if someone does have the data and they say, no, you were part of it, but then like who's lying, right? And it's
right.
God,
but just because they have the data doesn't mean they got it through the SolarWinds attack.
Agreed, John. Agree. Yes. Comes down to that issue of trust. Speaking of Cisco,
so before you end on that one, you're reading the end of Lee's article. I think this is amazing. Scamming the scammers, and so that was at solarleaks.com or solarleak.com. There's a copycat site at solarleak.net with the same website content but a different Monero address.
Just like scam on top of scam, like what are those little dolls where like you open it up, it's a little doll,
Matryoshka dolls.
Yeah, inside the little it's just scam inside a scam.
Sorry, I had to. All right, Paul. Sorry.
I was just
who's going to register solarleaks.bogus?
Right. Or SolarLeaks.security.
SolarLeaks.info.
My story number 2, 70 vulnerabilities will remain unpatched in end-of-life Cisco routers. Now, this sounded really bad when I read the headline. I was like, Cisco's irresponsible. I hate it when they do this. It comes back to our research that we talked about at the top of this segment with the WRT54G. We should fix everything. If it's end of life and you're not going to fix it, it's irresponsible. And then I read it, and it's like, well, the security bugs exist because basically the web management interface has vulnerabilities that it's standard boilerplate vulnerability description, allowing an attacker to send a crafted HTTP request could allow unauthenticated access and remote code execution, blah, 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 blah. But then it says an attacker able to successfully exploit these vulnerabilities would be able to execute arbitrary code with root privileges, and it sounds really bad. But then it says a mitigating factor is that a valid administrator credentials are required for exploitation. I'm like, wait, hold on. Wait a minute.
Hold the phone.
Why do I need an exploit to the HTTP server when I already have the admin credentials? Like, I can just go change the configuration on your switches. What do we need an exploit for? Like, that's...
Well... Maybe John could explain it. He has background in Wi-Fi. I mean,
This is in the small business line of Cisco gear, which I don't know if I use the ones that were mentioned here, but I use some of that at my house. Yeah. And it does have a really crappy web interface.
Right.
Like they wanted to say like, oh, on the enterprise gear, like it's so crappy because we know no one's going to use it, but we have to put it there just to... so marketing can put it on the website that you can manage it via the web. But on the small business gear, they're like, well, we need to do a little better because people might actually use it because they haven't, gotten a Cisco certification because it's a smaller business and it's just riddled with vulnerabilities. I mean, we've covered a lot of them, in this Cisco gear, but this is just ridiculous. I mean, Cisco's making themselves look bad for no reason. Like they should just come out and say like, these are not like critical vulnerabilities because you need admin privileges. You just come out and say, I respect you if you just came out and said it, right? Like, I don't know. But this is not an article from Cisco either. So I don't fault Cisco. I don't think you should patch. It kind of takes me to maybe you shouldn't patch these vulnerabilities if they require administrator privileges. I mean, they're being kind of nice and telling you that they're there, but they should also tell you that it doesn't matter, right? Like, just set some good passwords, turn off the web interface or whatever, and make some recommendations.
So I look at this similarly but different, where I see this as there's historically been a case where small businesses buy a router like this, they set it up, they get it working, and they never touch it again. They don't update it or nothing. And that's not a good model either. You can't, if these aren't set and forget devices, you've got to do something. But you're right. If you had guidance on what to disable and stuff, it'd be cool. But I still don't think you can leave it forever. You have to update it. You have to look at it.
I agree that I think some of the responsibility is educating your user base that you do need to do some updating and some due diligence.
But is this the way to do it?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, Joff, right? It's a lot of work to understand all the commands to enter into a Cisco router. And I think they're trying to make it easy for their customers with a web interface. And if the advice is disable it, now, I mean, many of us, not just Joff, know like what a pain in the butt it is to remember what those Cisco commands are to, make a VLAN or a port channel, or if you don't do it every day, right?
Yeah, you've got to be.
Or if you had the hard client,
your thing. But I mean, the smart install stuff that's been around for a while, has vulnerabilities in it, and it's we get a lot of traction out of that on internal network pen tests these days, right? So, it's a real issue. You exploit it. The Cisco box, whether it's a router, switch, or whatever, sends TFTP's packets configuration to you. It's like, thanks.
Do they respond to broadcast packets too to get that stuff set up?
It's not broadcast. This one's a unicast packet, but it doesn't matter. You send the packet and say, "Hey, give me your TFTP," and it's like, "Okay, here it is." That's not good, obviously. And once cracking a Cisco password within a configuration is usually not too trivial. Really, it's not too difficult. Sorry, is the word I was looking for. And then, of course, you're off to the races because everybody uses the same passwords across the entire network infrastructure. And when you've got people by the network balls, well, life's not going to be good, right?
Yeah.
It's I think I'll shut down your SCADA VLAN. Sorry about that.
There's a lot of interesting attacks on networking and IoT gear. And, what's interesting is, my story number 5, right? Like understanding TCP/IP stack vulnerabilities in the IoT. And John, you talked about ubiquity vulnerabilities. We're talking about vulnerabilities in some Cisco gear and in many different levels and very, rude. I mean, vulnerabilities that are really easy to exploit. I would argue that TCP/IP stack vulnerabilities are a little harder. You're going to find an exploit and maybe do some buffer overflows, of course. In that, there's a few out there documented in this article and ones we've talked about in the past. There are the very same ones documented in this article. What I found interesting was in this article, they're like, well, there's 3 foundational steps for dealing with TCP/IP stack vulnerabilities. 1, identifying all the devices on a network to understand which are vulnerable, assessing the risk introduced by these devices, which include their business context, criticality, and internet exposure, and then mitigating the assessed risks. Like, that's all we need to do. We should just do that. And everything would be great, except that's really hard, and why there's a whole industry built around cybersecurity and folks like us and people listening that work tirelessly every day to basically accomplish all those things that you just listed there. That set me off. All right, I'm off my soapbox now. That grinds my gears, right?
I like your number 12.
Number 12. So you don't want to go into my number 5. All right, we'll switch to number 12. Criminals are bypassing MFA to access organizations' cloud services. So many ways to bypass MFA. I don't know that I can disclose all the ones that I've learned about recently because they were kind of off back channel and not necessarily released. So let's talk about what's public, Tyler, because I can't talk.
I think some of it plays into our first kind of interview around the email, right? Like when we start talking about applications and what we allow our applications to access, and the Mac Outlook client was a great example where we've got multi-factor, we've got all this protection set up, but we have these applications that are not, up to date or not smart enough to receive that, or they authenticate and it's set and forget, and so you end up getting past or bypassing your MFA, and the applications have access, right? So there's that. So you have the ability.
I want to ask you a question about that. So I use software on Linux, which I think is available on all 3 major platforms. It's called Hiri, specific to Microsoft Office 365. Not a very well-known software package, but again, I'm on Linux, so I'm exploring, right, my options, because the browser 365 email, I'm like, I can't do it. And it will prompt me for my second factor. When it authenticates, it's like enter your password, and then it's like, oh, you haven't logged in a while, or this is a new client, and it will prompt me for my second factor. But so one of our previous conversations, like if I disable POP or IMAP or both for my account, then my email client stops working, and I'm like, crap, I have to re-enable that. And I'm like, but the settings for this are not. This is not a cut and dry 0 or 1 kind of thing. Like, there's a lot of options to configure what applications can authenticate, how they authenticate, and whether or not they honor the second factor. I feel like is a study. Like, you need a doctorate in Microsoft Active Directory to answer these questions definitively. No,
it is really hard, and the scripts and commandlets in which to do it, and then being able to dissect and analyze the permissions and what those permissions mean, is why Trimark has a very successful business at what they do. But the way in which applications actually authenticate, how long those tokens or cookies last, and then the application's ability to use those moving forward, and the security mechanism in which they've coded that into really is different from application to application.
Yeah,
there's not a lot of granular control over that.
I drive our MSP nuts because I pay attention to that, because I'm like, anytime I authenticate with any application, if you're not asking me for my second factor, I'm like, I'm filing a ticket, right? And they're like, oh, God, here's Paul again. And I'm like, this should ask me for my second factor. If it doesn't, there's some configuration that control has fallen off in the forest or was never enabled in the first place. But I'm like, anytime I authenticate with anything, and it seems like there's a half a dozen or more ways for applications to authenticate to Microsoft Office 365, this is kind of the crux of the issue when we come to MFA, right?
It really is, and that's just one way to bypass it, right? And this is where you really start to run into. There's a bunch of different ways to bypass it, between spoofing an MFA page, pushing a bunch of push requests, having the user approve those, making a legitimate domain in Azure with a subdomain, and call it single sign-on company name.azure.com. Yeah, someone's going to see that, pop it up, put in their factor. We're going to proxy that on, steal the cookie, and then have them re-enter their things and then authenticate on the second try. They're not going to be the wiser. They're not going to file a ticket because they got access and they thought it was just a glitch. So there's a bunch of ways to do this, but one of the big things that people are not thinking about, and one of the real scary parts of this, is what your browser holds from a cookie standpoint. Once you authenticate, the pass the cookie attack is simply that. You're able to take a cookie from the browser via a DAPI and utilize that. You can decrypt it. It's in Chrome. Mimikatz has the ability to decrypt those cookies because it's encrypted on Microsoft with the user token and something with inside of Chrome that then makes a DAPI.
Does that go to applications too? Like on Linux, I've got my email client, I've got Teams, and I've got my browser, all of which I'm authenticating in some capacity to Microsoft Office 365 is how I'll say it, because it's even the naming is confusing.
Which acronym is it today?
Yeah, exactly. But all of those have, is it all cookie? Does it, like the browser has cookies, but do my other applications, are they cookies, or like how, is it a cookie that's,
it's called modern authentication.
It's an Azure set cookie, right? Yeah.
Right.
Whether it's a browser or not, basically.
Right. So, and here's the deal. The authentication cookie lifetime by default is 14 days. Changing it to a shorter duration is an unsupported feature. But
you don't have the ability to do that without some crazy
You can, but it don't. it breaks shit. But
really?
what you can do is they
I'd
have
be
a thing
okay
called
like if
conditional
every
access that will help you.
if every day when I wake up I had to put my password and my second factor in, and I was good for that day. Then I go to sleep, wake up the next morning, I had to do it again. For me, obviously not for every user, but for me, I'm like, that's cool. But you can't do that, or you can, but it breaks shit.
You can, but there's some serious side effects that that we learned the hard way. That you don't want to do that, because we tried that and we thought it would be awesome. Office didn't. But the thing you can do is you can implement what's called conditional access, which means as you have different authentication profiles and responses, not only by host but also by IP address. So, for example, if I steal Tyler's token and try it on my machine over here, it won't work because I'm not on the right IP anymore. If I steal it and still do it from his machine, it's okay. And that's not just his token, that's even trying to log in.
And Lee, what you're talking about is different levels of security, right?
Right.
I think Microsoft customers should be able to decide, right? Like maybe for your organization, me having 14 days trusted access for my devices is cool. I like that if the profile of that device changes, my IP changes, my machine changes, my software operating system version changes, and they go, oh, wait a minute, I don't trust that because you're coming from a different IP, from a different OS, from a different version of the software. Like you gotta, we've talked about this, right? This is Beyond Corp or whatever Google's thing was. This is part of Zero Trust. This is a cool concept, right? That you've changed your behavior across the threshold, which we should be able to define as the implementer of the software, that now you have to enter your password and your second factor, or depending on how drastic it's changed, maybe I don't have to enter my password again. Maybe I just have to give my two-factor to go, you're still, I think you're still Paul using that machine. That's cool. But it sounds like the granular controls aren't quite there yet.
Well, they're there. They're just not implemented by default.
Yeah.
Conditional access is by default not turned on, and it's only supported for certain levels of tiers of O365. And so you have to get your subscription-based set up properly. So you can get as granular as accessing it from this machine as this user with this supported software version at this time from this IP address, or any combination of those, and those policies can be pushed down to different devices. That can be from your phone, that can be from your laptop.
Tyler, I have a question there. Are these policies set at the server or service level?
Yes.
Not on the device level?
Nope.
Right.
Nope. These are all at the service level. These are your access into O365.
Right.
This is your authentication into O365 or Azure.
Right. And you can set different policies for, say, getting at the portal and web apps than the thick desktop apps as well.
Yep.
And you can do things like you can say you can only log into these services, say the mobile apps can only come in from a specific set of IPs, which are only available if the mobile is got some sort of VPN going. So you can't just generally log in there. There's some things,
and
but
from a work
like
profile.
Tyler says, they're not on by default, and you've got to go find out about them.
Yep, which is what we're running into, right? Like the whole story is around we're starting to see a bunch of multi-factor authentication sessions being bypassed because tokens are being stolen. Like there's a ton of tooling that we're always doing as we're exploiting boxes, or even part of like ransomware or watering hole drive-by JavaScript. All of these things are usually coming in through the browser. So if we just exploit the browser and pull data out of the browser, that gives us the ability to then do a lot more nefarious things and bypass a lot of the controls that we'd be going after anyway. We talked about in the last segment how if we just got access to single sign-on or email, that provides us a ton of access to corporate secrets, IPs, potential access to an infinite number of things that we don't even have to touch the corporate network where there's a ton of visibility and possibility of detection. We can simply sit in the single sign-on or SaaS applications and live there as much as we want, and we can do that through things like pass the cookie attacks, where we're just stealing the cookie and decrypting those.
Love it. Joff looks like he's falling asleep, so I wanted to change gears for a second and engage Joff, because my story number one, I want to try and engage Joff on this one and pick your brain. So I found this interesting, Joff, and I think you'll especially find this interesting, is that there were 4 0 days used to infect Windows and Android devices. The headline is not all that interesting. When you dig into some of Google's description of this vulnerability, it starts to get really nerdy and really interesting, in my opinion. And one of them, I just like picked the first one. I'm like, well, what's that one all about? And then it started getting awesome. And it says, one of the features that makes JavaScript code especially difficult to optimize is the dynamic type system. Python also being dynamically typed in other similar languages would all suffer from this, right? And they said, so even for a trivial expression like A plus B, the engine has to support a multitude of cases depending on whether the parameters are numbers, strings, booleans, objects. Like, I had never considered this in a dynamic type language. When I'm doing an operation, I'm expecting the compiler to just know what types I'm using. It turns out it's smart about that, right? Because JIT compilation wouldn't make much sense if the compiler had to admit machine code that would handle every possible combination. Like, am I adding numbers? Am I adding strings? Is it a Boolean? Like, the compiler has to do very different things depending on the type. Since it doesn't know the type because I haven't declared it, it has to be smart about it. And smart hackers figure out a way to turn this into a vulnerability, which is absolutely fascinating. So the Chrome's JavaScript V8 engine tries to overcome this limitation through type speculation. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so turned on right now by the nerdiness in this article. It's awesome.
And it looks like Lee's brain hurts.
Yes.
Well, no, I'm sitting back thinking
kind of nuts, right? Type speculation? What?
Yeah. And yeah, we wonder why there's vulnerabilities when there's phrases in here that are using type speculation. I'm like, oh, wait a minute.
Well, I was thinking about the errors the C compiler used to spit out about implicit typecasting and stuff, where it was trying to guess what you're doing, but usually it was saying, I'm going to get it wrong. Here it's just freaking working. My brain is exploding. It's like, yeah, that is really cool, but damn,
but right, like in C, it knows it's an integer, and even the type of integer, because I've defined it as such, and so then it knows what machine code to generate and things like JavaScript, and I'm assuming Python, right? It has to make some decisions about. Well, I guess in Python, when it goes to if it has to compile it down into bytecode, it would make those decisions, right?
Yeah, well, it has to, right? It's going to look at the object on the right-hand side of the assignment, and it's going to say, well, this thing looks like an integer, and so I'm going to allocate, 64 bits, -1 for 2's complement, positive and negative, assuming a 64-bit interpreter, and so that's going to be the representation. To exploit that is kind of fascinating, because to say, well, I just kind of want to know how, right?
Yeah. If you follow the link in the article, it does explain how. Like, we don't have the time on this show to like go into all the how, but like to take this concept and extrapolate that into a vulnerability, someone spent a ton of time. And the attackers in this case weren't after a bug bounty, right? Like, they were after a payoff for some other reason, right? Nation state attack, or they were selling in the black market, whatever the case may be, right? It was very purposeful and very smart.
Is the assertion that they were able to craft data types that actually had machine code opcodes in the resulting data type as part of the exploitation? Because that would make sense to me. That's kind of where this would go.
This was what was called the Chrome infinity bug. And so they started getting into integers that were defined under a certain parameter and got into like a whole bunch of JavaScript code that I admittedly did not understand the syntax and would have had to done research to understand the syntax and then go back and understand the article. Okay. But Google Project Zero this month, January 2021, did post the and this is probably, this post in particular is got to be 6-7 pages long of description and code snippets to understand how they exploited it. And I was like, I'm really impressed. Like, that's freaking cool.
Yeah, the fact that they're trying to do forward prediction is that if that's part of the element that got exploited as well, that actually opens up a really interesting set of possibilities, right? That this thing will go on and on and on, because you've got to think that the data typing prediction algorithms are going to have some variance in them. So Yeah. Oh man,
dude! I mean,
world.
this article. So if you dig into the Google Project Zero, I mean, so like if one of the operands to the addition operator is a string, the output is guaranteed to be a string as well, right? So this is some of the predictions you can make, right? One of the operands is a string. I know I'm comparing strings, and therefore I can make those predictions and produce the appropriate bytecode for that. But math.random always returns a number. So then I can assume that if it's a number, that there are going to be two numbers. The compiler puts runtime checks for speculated types that trigger de-optimization, i.e. revert the execution in the interpreter and update the type feedback in case of one. I mean, it just goes on and on. Like every sentence you really have to kind of stop and interpret and think and then kind of read on in this entire article. One of the most amazing articles and descriptions, I think of how that's executed. And I think when we say, there's a 0-day exploit in the JavaScript interpreters that are embedded inside of a browser, it's going to these levels where you've got to have a really solid handle on computer science and programming languages to really understand the description of the vulnerability, let alone be smart enough to be one of the folks that have actually discovered the flaw that led you to code execution, for this. It's impressive.
Yeah.
Nice. So next, if we do next story, John pinged me one.
Yes.
So that isn't in the show notes.
Oh, there you go, John. Oh, thanks, John.
Damn, throw down, boy. Go ahead, John.
Bring it. Come on.
So last week, it was, I think last Monday, is that the 5th? Skellsec posted, and they've implemented the Smb protocol via WebAssembly. So basically, anything you can do via Smb can now be done via any type of malicious link or whatever if you visit an attacker's page or whatever. So there's integrates Unpacket and Python and all those kinds of things. So the flexibility and the capability there is that's a lot compared to what we had before in terms of attacking a browser and then pivoting internally afterwards.
So John, what does that really mean? Like we can
how is John? So how is WebAssembly interpreted in the browser? Right? I mean, we just talk about how JavaScript is interpreted in the browser, and I think the complexity that's in there speaks to why we need the fastest processors on the market to run our machines, just to run Chrome, right? But WebAssembly is yet a different interpreter that's in the browser that's not JavaScript, right?
Yeah, and then I don't know all the details of that, but it does go to lower level processing, so it's a faster way to run code than using JavaScript, right? That's why, like, we all complain about Chrome taking over our memory and
because JavaScript's interpreted,
interpretation, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot more efficient.
The browser provides a lot of options too for things like WebSockets and the way that we would leverage something like the Outlook attack and the ability to pivot from something like the browser persistence with a triggered execution that then can pivot into an internal network and be interpreted. That's highly useful from an attacker standpoint.
Maybe we just need to go back to Flash in the browser. Oh wait, never mind. That's not an option. I did have a question on this. So Adobe fixes 7 critical flaws. Also in this update, they say they block Flash player content. And I did a little bit of research, and they all basically said the same high level thing. Like basically, Adobe's no longer supporting Flash player as of December 31st, 2020, and Adobe will block Flash content from running in Flash player beginning January 12th, which was 2 days ago. They recommend that all users immediately uninstall the Flash player to help protect their systems because they won't be pushing out updates. My question is, if they're not pushing out updates, how are they blocking Flash content? Does that mean your Flash plugin, before it loads content, is checking in with Adobe and go, like, hey, should I load Flash content? Like, I don't understand how they're blocking Flash. Like, if you've got a Flash
plugin, it's got a kill switch in it. It won't execute after a certain date.
Oh, so they at a certain time they rolled out an update, Lee, that said after a certain date, I'm not going to render Flash content.
Right. It was embedded in one of the updates last summer, so it's been there for a while.
And this is
okay. Thank you, Lee. That was I was confused.
And I'd like to provide give some empirical data and that type of stuff. So open the skeleton, open the closet and find a whole bunch of skeletons in there. Wife got a new laptop for Christmas because her old one was old.
Happens with our spouses, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and security people, like cobblers, the kids.
Well, to be honest with you, they spoil us in so many different ways, but we spoil them. Being in the roles that we're in, we're like, we give them technology that just works. When it breaks, we fix it. When it needs to be updated, we update it for them. Like they don't have to. My wife's like, if you ever the whole got hit by a bus thing, she's like, I have no idea what to do.
Everybody in the family this year got new stuff.
Right. But what's funny is that's not just a gift to them; it's a gift to you because it's easier to maintain newer stuff.
Let's put it this way: do you know how many times I heard in a day that I had to reboot my laptop because it would not join the Wi-Fi network anymore?
Oh, I know. Yeah,
because there was something wrong with it and I couldn't figure it out.
It's a gift for everyone. Newer technology is a gift for everyone.
And I asked today. I said, "How did it get dumped off the network?" She said, "No, it's been like Christmas since I've got dumped off the network. It's great." And the problem is that she has played this game, a Facebook game, for years. And I mean years. We're talking 10 years. It's like, it's not Farmville. It's like Farmtown. I can't even keep track. Right. Like, I've never taken an interest in it. And it's Flash-based. And
wow.
I migrated her to Chrome from Edge or Internet Explorer on her new machine or Firefox. Regardless, she's on Chrome now. And she tried to go to load the game, and she's like, "Fix it."
Yeah,
I'm like,
"Doesn't work."
I'm like, "Well,
work your magic." Your magic.
I'm like, "All right, maybe it's time to find a new game." She says, "I've been playing this for 10 years. I have like 1 trillion coins. Like, I'm winning." I'm like, "Oh, all right." And like, we could like go around things and enable Flash plugins. And she played the game today, and it's past the 12th, and it's still based in Flash. So, like, did it really die?
I got this Windows XP VM in my lab, sweetie. Can you play your game on that?
But did you die?
All right, yeah.
I was just about to say, you're going to have to Dockerize that or VM app that and make it revert snapshots all the time.
Right, there's got to be an archive of old Flash players out there. Like, there's totally going to be a black market for Flash players for like the 3% of Flash applications.
The sad part is that there are still hundreds of thousands of people that play this game.
Oh boy.
And clearly there's some monetization there because they don't give that shit away for free.
Yep.
And are they going to migrate? And like, what's the deal? Like, as of today, she still played it, to the best of my knowledge. I haven't gotten a text that she can't play said game, because that's probably what she's doing right about now while I'm at podcast.
Well, there's people out there Googling, like, my porn site doesn't work anymore because it was Flash, and where do I get a Flash-supported browser somewhere or whatever, right?
But this is literally a machine that we bought right before Christmas. She got it for Christmas. We set it up, 2 days after Christmas because the kid stuff came first because she's like that. And, like, it's working. But it took us a couple of hoops to jump through to get it to render Flash content, and Flash content is still rendering. Even after my understanding was that shit was going to go away.
But
I'm like, this game is going to go away. I'm like, I get hours back of her life.
But to your point, Larry, there's, I think a lot of folks that won't upgrade because their Flash is working and they're savvy enough or have access to savvy enough people to go, that's not going to work if you upgrade. So in some sense, this could take us a step back where people don't want to upgrade because stuff's going to stop working.
For me, it was one of those things like, oh, hey, maybe it would be a good idea if you didn't play that. Like,
find a new game?
For many years,
Is it Animal Farm? What's the newest one? There's a whole science behind these games to get you addicted to, it's like Sim City, but then there was Farmville, then there was Animal.
It was either Farmville or Farmtown.
Yeah,
and it was one of those two, and I can't remember which. But those were the addictive. It was like The Sims.
Well, I was listening to Twit, and they were talking about the addictive nature of these games, right? I have to build and maintain my farm, and then like if I don't play the game, like stuff dies and people in the virtual characters in my town get really mad because there's rotting crops and dead animals everywhere, and people are really mad at me, and they say that there's like this, it's like a drug addiction, right?
Yeah.
They say there's this like ramp up where it's really fun and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and then I keep playing, and then at a certain point there's kind of this taper off where like I still feel like I have to play, and I'm not playing because it makes me happy, I'm playing because I still have to play.
Because if I don't, my virtual things that I spend all this time will die.
I feel bad if I don't play. Like it's a really messed up kind of thing.
Yep. For her,
California.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think for her, it's very much the she got to that plateau where it was like, if I don't play, they're gonna die.
Yes.
And then now it's like, well, I've played for so long.
I'm not playing because I want to. I'm playing because I have to.
I'm playing because I have to. And it's not like she spends anymore. It's not like she spends, a whole ton of time like strategizing about the things that she needs to do, like World of Warcraft or any of that type of stuff.
Stuff I do.
It's like it's like stuff that I do. It's like stuff that she does to like, like this is mindless now.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Oh, and as we all know, everyone being home and all that stuff, you just like, I need to just go chill out for a while.
You could do something mindless.
Agreed. Yep.
Like
for me, it's looking at memes, right?
Like adult coloring books. Like that's something mindless you go and do to relax, and that's
Yep.
the thing that she does to relax, and I get it. But it's Flash based, and it still works.
Crazy. So there was my article number 8 I thought was really interesting. So it's how I found a bug in YouTube that let me watch private videos I wasn't allowed to. A computer science student found this bug, and it was really interesting because it speaks to the silent movie thing. Like they figured out that there was this service that allowed again, it's this kind of like third party access into YouTube that's like, well, you need to be able to watch this video and take a certain screenshot or look at a thumbnail at a certain point to see some kind of certain thing. I forget the use case. And this person figured out that with a Python script, they could basically take a video ID of a private video, find a loophole in the API that if they iterated over it, could take screenshots in such succession that they could save all of the screenshots and reconstruct the video, albeit in poor quality and albeit without audio, but be able to reconstruct the private video, even though it was not meant to be public. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the hacker spirit right there. Like,
right?
There's some weird things I've done to get access to private videos before, and that was well past any level of effort I probably would have put in. Although I've put in some effort to other things and other craft, but man, that was quite the dedication. So much you give that guy a job. Right?
I agree. I like the hacker spirit. My story number 11, minimizing cyber attacks by managing the life cycle of non-human workers. It's important to manage the life cycle of alien workers from outer space, not just humans. I didn't get the title of this article. But what the article was talking about was bots and service accounts and things like that. But like the title, I was like, being a fan of science fiction, like you lost me right at the title. Like non-human workers, does that mean that aliens?
Squirrel was running.
I did, and I feel bad that it lost, because service accounts are important as we talk about Active Directory, of course, right?
Well, we were talking with an insurance like we've been talking with several insurance companies recently, and one of the major themes that we've seen and having responded to a bunch of breaches is service account abuse. Like regardless of what abuse it is and what ransomware it is, one of the things that's almost always in a privileged group and almost always abused, whether it's on-prem or not, is service accounts. Services and the tools that people use. I mean, SolarWinds is prime example. These service accounts require those privileges to do some useful functionality, and that's what the program's designed for. So I think they're always going to be a problem, and there's always going to be a kind of cat and mouse pushback game where you have to watch that access and least privilege model, but you're always going to be up against the business use case and the functionality that is required for those to do what they need to do.
Just wrapping up, I saw an article that was increasing the resiliency against SolarGate and other sophisticated attacks with Microsoft Defender And then that was my story number 10. My story number 9 was remote code execution vulnerability affecting Microsoft Defender. Just let that sink in and go read both those articles.
Yep.
Also, a user successfully runs Ubuntu on a jailbroken iPhone 7. If only that was like practical, right? Obviously, this was just an academic exercise. Of course, you have to go all the way back to iPhone 7 to be able to find a vulnerability that would allow you to do this. Kind of begs the question, if we did have full open access to Apple hardware, what we could actually accomplish. Also kind of reminds me of the M1 chip, right? M1 chip is amazing. If you load, and someone loaded QEMU or some other virtualization software on it, it was able to run Windows, and it was way faster than even running Windows natively on Intel hardware. And I was like, that's really telling. The M1 design, and from what I've heard from every tech journalist and everyone that's reviewed it and tested it and benchmarked it, is that it's knocking it out of the park. Performance-wise.
Intel and AMD, Apple's coming for you.
Right?
Yep.
But I think that's an important thing for innovation, right? I think Intel and AMD now need to step up their game and go. They're gonna have their versions of vPro. Tyler, I think, is a pretty close competitor to what the M1 chip is providing.
I just think it's fascinating that we went through this period of processor diversity for such a long period, and then we consolidated down, right? And there was just Intel, AMD. Yep. I mean, back in the day, we had Sun in the game, we had DEC in the game, we had a bunch of.
We had IRIX, right? IRIX with SGI, right? Yeah.
All right, and then we consolidated down to these two, putting aside the small mobile market for a minute. I know AMD
and the IoT with MIPS has at least a dozen or more different versions too as well.
But then Apple drops this bomb like boom, we're going out on our own again. It's like, whoa.
And they did an amazing job with it. I applaud them. It's really amazing what they've accomplished from an engineering standpoint.
Paul, I got a quick last one. Just, off the record, no, not off the record, off the beaten path. Man arrested for counterfeiting 25 popsicle sticks to claim prize. Prize. In Japan, a popsicle company said, hey, if you eat enough of our popsicles, if you find one that has a secret code on it, you can get a very exclusive Pokemon card, which retail for about $500 on the secondary market. A $500 Pokemon card. Cool. So this guy found that if you had a winning one, you could basically take the code and you could basically print it on any old blank popsicle stick.
Like a what do they call that when you print something on wood like that, Larry? What is that?
Engraving or
laser engraving. Yeah.
So he's laser etching. Yeah. He basically found that he could once he had a winning one, he could duplicate what was on the winning popsicle stick to any popsicle stick, because there was nothing different about the popsicle stick aside from the engraving. And he created a bunch of them and redeemed several of them, which raised suspicion because they all came from the same location. And he was arrested and charged with fraud because he redeemed these because there was an intent to defraud the company of being able to get these cards to make some money.
I'd classify that as fraud. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I would classify that as fraud.
Agreed. Yeah. But the point was
clever.
Clever, yes.
Yeah. There wasn't anything special about the popsicle sticks aside from this picture. Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
All right, you just totally made me go out shopping for a new MacBook now.
And popsicles. And popsicles.
Yep.
But I know, seriously, I think it's going to put MacBook back in the game, right? I mean,
agree,
in the InfoSec industry, we had a moment there where we're like, guys, come on, you're doing some shit that's
there could still be a moment, Joff, as I research software. Some software providers, such as the AV market, for example, in researching some stuff for the show, they're like, we don't support M1 chip yet. So be mindful of that. If you're a user and you're like email, web browser, especially if you're Safari and you're all into the Apple platform, you're reaping all the benefits of M1 using Apple software. You start delving outside of that into more specialized AV software, which is very popular on the Mac platform, right? DaVinci Resolve, we're talking like people that render movies and stuff like that. M1, it's going to take some time because it's ARM. It's going to be different. And yes, there's Rosetta 2.
Rosetta 2, yeah.
But even Leo Laporte was the one that was talking about it. It was like, yeah, some of my stuff still doesn't run. However, like when I go in a web browser and I start loading websites, he's like, it is super fast. So I think there's a lot of promise, Joff. Once the software keeps up and starts to get updated, it's going to be awesome.
Did they make it so you can like upgrade the freaking memory and the storage again?
No, dude, it's Apple. That's even more out the window. Like whatever you get with your M1, like that's what you have. Period. End of story.
Yep.
There is no updating, right? But also, I think, it's telling because I think it's a diversion in. From the hacker spirit, certainly, that once you get an iPhone and they're like, hey, you've been listening to music at a certain volume level. I don't know if you follow this story, right?
You can turn that. You can turn that off.
In the U.S., you can turn that off. In some other countries that reported I saw that you can't, that they're like, we need to turn the volume down for you. Like, that's why I'm Android and Linux, because I want that level of control.
Right.
Like I'm in control of my own eardrums. I know what safe listening levels are, and I want to moderate that myself. I don't want the software and hardware to dictate things like audio volume level.
There's probably another story there, but it's getting late.
It is getting late. We covered a lot of ground in this segment.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and Tyler, I think you've probably been burned on the Apple thing from someone who's bought you an Apple MacBook that. Penny wise and pound foolish.
And, I don't know, man. I need about 4 terabytes and about 64 gigs of memory. So when Apple can do that for me,
yep,
I might think about it.
Don't get me wrong. I think Apple with 32 gigs of memory and 1 terabyte is good. But when they only buy you one with 128 gigs like that, nope.
Yeah, you can't deal with that.
No.
Wait, hold on. 100 gigs of RAM or hard drive space?
Hard drive space.
Yeah,
hard drive. Yep. No comment.
Yeah, you can't deal with that. Nope. I struggle at 1 terabyte. And mine's a 2017 model, so I'm sniffing around for something new.
Yep. Yeah. My 1 terabyte is comfortable, and I've been comfortable at 1 terabyte for years because there's stuff that you move to NAS or whatever. But it's getting late.
Larry, take us out.
Over and terabytes.